He was the heir of the gods. Yet she had to feign madness, living as the shame of the empire. All because her twisted father murdered his own kin and seized the throne. Cursed by the goddess, his body slowly turned to stone. The goddess delivered an oracle. Only the empire's strongest warrior could save it. But the emperor seemed to have twisted the true meaning of her words. He forced his children to slaughter one another, declaring that only the last survivor would inherit the crown. Overnight, the palace of daytime peace became a nightmarish killing ground. In just a single year, only 4 remained. Every day, Lisbeth lived in constant fear, never knowing if tomorrow would be her last. With a woman's sixth sense, she knew she would be the next to fall. In this brutal game of succession, there was no right to step aside. Only pain and death awaited her, no matter how careful she was. And sure enough, on a bright sunny afternoon, she drank the poisoned tea. Only 2 were left. She called out to her elder brother, her eyes filled with despair. Faintly, she heard her father's voice. "Is she my 4th daughter?" How laughable. After all her desperate efforts to survive, even her father couldn't remember who she was. The saintess of the century perished before her awakening. Yet it wasn't the end. She returned to 5 years before her death by poison. At the age of 10, the first news she heard upon opening her eyes was that the 4th princess had passed away. The maid's smile seemed to mock her. "Your death won't be far behind." She trembled all over, unable to erase the terror and pain of her final moments. Because of this cruel and absurd succession system, the nightmare replayed itself, and she was nothing more than a low-born concubine's daughter. But since she had been reborn, she was determined to live. The best way to survive was to keep playing the fool. On the day the 4th princess was killed, news spread through the palace that the 5th princess had gone mad. Thanks to that, Lisbeth managed to survive until the age of 19. Wherever she appeared, chaos followed. The grander the banquet, the more she acted insane. Strangely enough, the emperor favored this daughter, even claiming she might be the one to save him. Utterly absurd. At one banquet, Lisbeth sang and danced the entire night. Looking at the wounds covering her feet, she sighed. Who knew playing the fool could be so exhausting? To convince everyone she was truly insane, she had to keep doing outrageous things. Just days ago, she climbed the thorn-covered city wall as expected. The commoners cursed her as a lunatic, exactly the result she wanted. But then her foot slipped and she fell from the wall. Though she miraculously escaped unscathed, the memory still made her shiver. Now only 3 remained, and her plan was simple: outlast one of her brothers. Once everyone's attention turned to the heir, she would seize the chance to escape. At that moment, the crown prince entered the room. She hurriedly tossed away the bandage she had just taken off her foot. She fought to steady her fear, wearing an innocent smile, hoping the clean feet wouldn't reveal a single flaw to her perceptive brother. "Brother, let me sing you a song." Whether he agreed or not, she began to spin, leap, and sing. Facing the man who intended to kill her, she forced herself to stay calm. Any tiny slip would give her away. The crown prince, clearly out of patience, interrupted her and said the envoy would arrive soon. He even mentioned Lord Rocky's warning, "Don't disgrace the empire when the time comes." His eyes were cold enough to chill the room. Stroking his sister's smiling face, he murmured, "I came today to kill you." She was a once-in-a-century deity, yet she fought for survival on the edge of death every day. To stay alive, she kept spinning and dancing. The more people called her a disgrace, the more it served her purpose. But her act had long been seen through by her sharp brother. Since she was the disgrace of a fallen house, he wouldn't soil himself with that kind of blood. "My dear sister," he said, "you get to live one more day." Before leaving, he noticed an ointment by the table leg, picked it up and tossed it to his foolish sister. "Looks like your maid is truly loyal to you." With that, he slammed the door shut. Only Lisbeth knew the truth. Everyone considered her a disgraceful lunatic. Why would any maid bring her medicine? Instead of pondering the ointment's origin, she needed to think about how to survive. Her brother had just mentioned the imperial envoy's arrival. She had to gather more information. And when she heard that the master of the Twin Towers would be coming as well, she fell into deep thought. The envoy's arrival would inevitably interrupt the succession ritual for the empire's sake. For her, was this a crisis, or a chance? She crouched in a corner, listening intently, when her second brother suddenly appeared behind her. Startled, she quickly hid behind the wall, forcing an innocent smile. After all, just a few months ago she had watched him snap the fifth prince's neck right in front of her. At the time she thought he would draw his sword on her, but he simply brushed past. Perhaps he found her too foolish to bother killing. Eavesdropping is not a good habit. Her second brother's eyes were sharp, as if piercing straight through her. So different from his usual cold detachment, he reminded her not to forget tonight's gathering with their father. As he passed by Lisbel, he whispered, "That wasn't a wise choice, you'd better be careful in the future." Lisbel froze on the spot. Her instincts screamed that he had seen through her act. She burst into wild laughter, but inside she was drowning in fear. What exactly did his words mean? Was he warning her not to dance before their father, or not to attend the banquet at all? One elder brother was already trouble enough. Now even the second brother was watching her. Yet more terrifying than her brothers was her twisted father. Years ago, the tyrant murdered 5 of his wives and forced his children to watch and learn. If not for decades of brain thrombosis, who knows what further horrors he might have committed. Even now, the memory made Lisbel tremble. If she had to die, she would rather be poisoned by her brothers than fall into her father's hands. Dinner was destined to taste bitter. The royal feast, held only once a year, had fewer and fewer seats with each passing year. Perhaps next time her own chair would be empty. Lisbel lost her appetite in an instant. The silence at the table was suffocating. Even more terrifying was the massive black serpent at her father's feet, slithering back and forth. Even the strongest men would go weak in the knees at the sight. "Once the envoy departs, I will pass the throne to one of you." Her father's words shattered the suffocating silence. He explained that his time was nearly up, the curse having consumed most of his body. "You understand what I mean, don't you?" Lisbel's smile slowly froze. Only a fool wouldn't understand. This meant the battle for the crown was about to turn into its final bloodshed. The crown prince had the queen's relatives as his backing, while the second brother commanded a band of loyal knights. And her? All she could do was scrape by, trying to survive. Worse still, it seemed everyone had already seen through her act. She cast a glance at her father, only to meet eyes as sharp as blades. With a gesture, he dismissed her 2 brothers, leaving Lisbel alone. A dreadful premonition rose in her chest. "Who do you think it will be, my little princess?" The question made her heart leap to her throat, but she forced a childish smile and threw her arms around him. "I just want to live, nothing more," she said, even tugging playfully at his face. But her father wasn't amused. "Because your grace period," he said coldly, "is over." Lisbel staggered back in fear. At last she understood his true intent. They had all been deceived from the very moment they stepped into the dining hall. The final battle had already begun. "Go ahead and kill your 2 brothers. I'm curious how long you'll last," the despicable father said, his eyes flashing with murderous intent. His pet black serpent fixed its gaze on Lisbel and kept flicking its tongue. Every time he saw that daughter, he remembered that arrogant woman. Whoever she resembled, he only wanted Lisbel dead, out of his sight and mind. The serpent bared its fangs and coiled into an attack pose. Even if it was only meant to intimidate, Lisbel's face went pale. After her father left, her mind raced with escape plans, yet nothing workable came to her. All she could see was death. She closed her eyes to think, unaware the danger behind her was closing in. She reacted fast and wasn't struck, but a Western-style sword was already pressed to her throat. "If you hadn't danced, I wouldn't want to kill you," a whisper said, an accusation tied to Lisbel's mother, who once drove the crown prince's mother to ruin and yet still danced before him now. Blood trickled down her neck. Lisbel felt something strange in her hand. At the edge of life and death, a light began to swell in her palm. As her brother's blade descended, she clenched both hands and prayed to the goddess. If she was reborn, let her not die again. A blinding sphere of light engulfed her, and as the sword grazed her neck, the force hurled her backward. When the second brother arrived, he witnessed the scene, but no one could explain what had just happened. Lisbel staggered, drained of strength, and collapsed to the ground. The crown prince carefully reached out to check if his sister was still alive. But then the room began to tremble. The light around Lisbel flared once more, bursting into brilliance. In an instant she vanished, and the crown prince's wrist was cut by the radiance. At the same time, far out in the wilderness, the grand imperial envoy was drawing closer to the kingdom. To secretly investigate the royal family's turmoil, they had set out ahead of schedule. The male lead, Oshiers, had no idea what was truly happening. only that something seemed to be calling him. Bathed in moonlight, his roguish elegance made him devastatingly handsome. His friends praised him endlessly, saying he could conquer the world with looks alone, yet he insisted on relying on strength. Suddenly, a glow flickered in the distance. He touched his ear, activating a device called Baal. Within moments, Baal had locked onto the source of the light. He summoned a teleportation circle, ignoring his friend's grumbling. The next second, his figure vanished beneath the silver moonlight. The royal city was calm, until the ground shook violently with a thunderous roar. A beam of light shot up from the palace, stirring whispers among the crowd. Ashieres pushed his way through the people, heading straight toward the light. Not far ahead, a girl lay shrouded in a faint glow, her feet covered in wounds. The corner of his lips curved into a smile as he scooped her up. "Daughter of Hilo, I finally found you." Lisbel awoke in an unfamiliar room, staring at her hands in shock. Remembering what had just happened, she quickly touched her neck, terrified her head might already be gone. Was it her desperate prayer that worked, or the goddess's protection? She couldn't tell. She moved to open the window to see where she was, but a man's voice stopped her from behind. "If you open it, you'll expose yourself. You're not ready yet." She spun around warily, only to be met with the sight of a stunningly handsome man. Ashieres reached out and closed the window, the space between them charged with a subtle tension. He looked so dazzlingly handsome it was almost blinding. Lisbel was stunned, not just handsome but unreasonably so. The moment she first laid eyes on him, she nearly fell head over heels. Thankfully, she snapped back to her senses. "Where am I? And who are you?" Ashieres dodged her question, clearly unwilling to answer. His gaze fell on the blood seeping from her foot, and he reached out, intending to help. Lisbel shrank back with a sharp cry, "Don't touch me." Startled by her fierce reaction, his hand froze midair. A wisp of green smoke twined around his fingers, swirling before his face until it formed a pair of glasses. "Better. I look like a good guy now, right?" Lisbel was speechless. His looks were practically sealed away by those glasses. Ashieres raised both hands in mock surrender, assuring her he was harmless, and reminded her she should take care of her injured foot. Only then did she feel the stabbing pain beneath her. While she was distracted, Ashieres suddenly pulled her into his arms. "As your savior, I think I've earned at least this much." He unwrapped the bandages on her foot, and with a sweep of magic, the blood vanished and the pain eased instantly. Lisbel's eyes widened in wonder. It was incredible. She had never imagined magic could be used for healing. Then he called out a strange name into the air as if summoning something. Her heart raced. Was there someone else here? With a whoosh, a bundle of smoke or thread-like mist rolled forward and tossed out a roll of bandages. Ashieres picked it up with practiced ease. In the blink of an eye, he finished wrapping her foot. "If you want it to heal quickly, stay off it for the next couple of days." Lisbel gave an innocent smile. "Why should I trust you?" She couldn't read this man at all. Handsome, yes, but dangerously so. And in this kingdom, magic was strictly forbidden. Which meant there shouldn't be any mages here. By now, she had nearly guessed it. He had to be the master of the mage tower traveling with the envoy. Her words, however, told Ashieres everything he needed to know. She was from the palace. His quick wit only made Lisbel laugh. She reached out, ruffling his hair. With magic that powerful, perhaps he could become her ally. Then she might truly have a chance in the struggle for the crown. Cupping his refined face, she said, "As long as you don't hurt me, I'll obediently stay by your side." With that, she kissed him, never realizing she was stepping right into his trap. The last princess, branded as insane, turned out to be the daughter of Hillel. Watching her sleep, Ashieres chuckled to himself. 13 years ago, the goddess had placed her divine seal. The world believed only that a saintess would awaken, but in truth, it was part of a wager between Ashieres and the goddess. Whoever made the saintess submit before her awakening would be the victor. No one expected her to be royal, but it didn't matter. He had found her at last. Ashieres gazed at his prize with satisfaction that he was the one who discovered her first. So this woman was his. To draw her closer, Ashieres tended to Lisbel with every detail, bringing her meals, healing her wounds, caring for her with painstaking attention. She had never known such kindness. Yet she knew well that this mage's intentions were far from pure. She could feel the dangerous aura radiating from him. But being that powerful was, in a way, good for her. Against her two brothers he could be the perfect trump card. Sitting together at the dining table, the scene felt oddly like that of a married couple who had lived together for years. Ashieres pulled out a chair, sat down and locked eyes with her. While Lisbel pondered how best to use him as her pawn, Ashieres simply gazed at her, his eyes calm as still water. Suddenly she realized she didn't even know his name. Blinking, she blurted out awkwardly, "Why do you keep staring at me?" With a smile warm enough to melt snow, Ashieres replied, "Because you're beautiful." He never seemed stingy with his compliments. Lisbel fidgeted under his unwavering gaze, then snapped back in defiance, "Then I'll stare at you too." She leaned closer and the two of them locked eyes like children in a contest. But Ashieres truly was admiring her, as if she were a masterpiece, a violet in bloom, and he voiced his praise without reservation. His gaze brimmed with obsession, while Lisbel grew increasingly flustered under the weight of his praise. Ashieres reached out, gently brushing her cheek. A thought struck her. Could he actually like her? Then another idea flickered in her mind. If he did, wasn't that a bargain? His affection cost her nothing. Tilting her head with a sultry look, she asked softly, "Are you bewitched by me?" Ashieres didn't deny it, that he simply let her say whatever she wanted. But his indifference made Lisbel bristle. She was not some woman to be toyed with. She yanked back the strands of hair he had touched and snapped that he was not to lay a hand on her again. Beneath his roguish act, Ashieres was coolly analyzing her. For the past 2 days, Lisbel hadn't shown a single sign of madness. What's more, she displayed no fear of magic at all. That alone made her far from ordinary. He leaned closer, his face nearly brushing hers. Their sparring across the dining table reached a lull. Then Ashieres asked outright, "You said you'd stay by my side. How long?" Lisbel fell silent. She knew returning to the palace meant danger, yet she wasn't sure how much she could trust the man before her. Suddenly, Ashieres sensed golden energy stirring within her. He realized at once that she had no control over this power. So why not seize the moment? Make her yield completely to him? Lisbel finally broke the silence, asking Ashieres if he had seen that strange being who saved her that day. Instead of answering, Ashieres removed his glasses and strode toward her. He leaned down so close she could catch his scent. Flustered, she stammered, "What are you doing?" His response was sudden, a kiss that caught her completely off guard. It was no mere kiss. Lisbel sank into it, yet felt shackled, bound by invisible chains she couldn't break free from. But in that moment, a voice buried deep within her consciousness cried out, warning her. She shattered the chains in her mind. She was free. She belonged to no one but herself. When the kiss ended, Lisbel fixed him with wide, shimmering eyes, staring him down. Ashieres braced himself for a slap, but to his surprise she wasn't shocked at all. She saw through his ploy and said coldly, "Once for you, once for me. Now we're even. Don't let it happen again." Her commanding tone stung his pride. "Don't let it happen again?" Lisbel warned him flatly, "I will never give myself to a mage. I won't allow you to toy with me." But what stunned Ashieres most was not her defiance. It was that, even in her freshly awakened state, Lisbel had resisted submission. He leaned closer to Lisbel, pressing her on her words. "So next time I kiss you, I have to wait until you kiss me first, is that it?" His fingers brushed against her lips, a teasing tension lingering between them. "Tell me, what must I do for you to kiss me?" Lisbel laughed, recognizing his desire to claim her. Playing up her charm, she deftly shifted the subject back to the mysterious light. This time Ashieres admitted honestly he had indeed seen the light. Lisbel's excitement burst forth. Her eyes sparkled like stars as she clutched his collar, her radiant gaze so enchanting he could hardly resist. But then a voice echoed in his mind, "You will fall in love with her, and that is why you cannot win against me." Rang like a fated curse. Painful memories surged within Ashieres. He realized then. This girl was no harmless princess, she was the saintess of Hilal. His gaze turned cold once more, though his lips still shaped a lie. Seeing her disappointment, he merely adjusted the collar she had tugged askew. Lisbel, however, knew he was lying. Turning her head away in defiance, she said flatly, "I'm tired. I want to rest." Ashieres, slightly exasperated by Lisbel's mood, carried her back to the room and warned her not to wander. Lisbel gave him a pure smile. "Even if you didn't say it, I wouldn't run. I told you, I'll stay by your side for now." She clasped his hand. For a fleeting moment, Ashieres felt his resolve waver. He left in silence while Lisbel sat alone on the bed. Frustrated by his lies, she looked down at the golden glow slowly rising in her palm. She was certain Ashieres knew more than he admitted. She recalled his words and understood. He hadn't saved her out of kindness that he wanted her. Yet she also needed his strength. Time was running out. Between her and her brothers, only one could lift the curse. There had to be a victor. As if by fate, Lisbel sat in the sunlit room, her gaze fixed on the window for a long while. At last, Ashieres appeared that he was puzzled. How had she noticed him when he was cloaked in invisibility? Lisbel answered calmly, "I'm very sensitive to danger." That left Ashieres speechless. Was she basically saying he was the danger? As he lowered his head, Lisbel made up her mind and stepped toward him. With a smile like the blazing glow of dusk, she asked softly, "Paige, will you help me?" Ashieres wasn't surprised by her words. Instead, he spoke with lazy ease. "Then will you kiss me?" They exchanged smiles as if sealing the simplest of bargains. Lisbel understood all too well. What Ashieres wanted wasn't just a kiss. What he truly sought was the power hidden inside her. She had no desire to give it to him, yet it might be the best option for now, so she extended her hand, trying to strike a deal. Ashieres said nothing. Instead, he pulled her abruptly into his arms and whispered in her ear, "You're not crazy after all." 2 days later, Lisbel stood by the window, counting the hours. She knew her 2 brothers inside the castle were likely already fighting to the death. All she wanted was to survive. She stole a glance at the man sitting on the bed, knowing he was suppressing her power, keeping it from growing any stronger, while she herself still couldn't control it. She wasn't sure she could trust him, but it was still better than being alone. At last, she confessed to Ashieres her wish, to return to the palace. She gazed out the window, eyes firm with resolve. Ashieres gave no clear answer. Then, to her shock, he stepped forward, swept her into his arms and laid her back onto the bed. Ashieres used magic to heal Lisbel's wound again. Unlike last time when he only dulled the pain, this time he fully closed it. Lisbel was shocked to realize he could have healed her completely all along. She demanded, "Then why didn't you heal me before?" Ashieres sighed, "Because I was afraid you'd run." Lisbel froze, memories flashing of her brother trying to kill her. With a bitter smile, she muttered, "So you're just like them after all." Though Ashieres had healed her foot, it wasn't permanent. Once the magic faded, the wound might tear open again. Lisbel didn't care. She rose, walked to the window and laughed. "Looks like trading a kiss for you was the right choice." Ashieres said nothing, simply resting his hands on her shoulders. With a flick, he conjured a cloak over her. Lisbel blinked in surprise. Draped only in silk sleepwear, she had to admit it was necessary. She knew this man couldn't be trusted, yet the rare kindness still stirred something faint in her heart. Lisbel then revealed her goal, to become the last surviving royal of Valdemar. Ashieres didn't quite understand. She only told him to see for himself, and demanded he protect her safety, and cover her face. Ashieres grew even more confused. Lisbel let out a helpless sigh, muttering inwardly, was he truly that dense or just too vain? All she wanted was to cover that ridiculously handsome face of his. The royal city was eerily silent, yet filled with a killing aura. For 5 days straight, Valdemar had been shrouded in tension. The 2 princes had already clashed once, but the battle ended without a victor. Even the tyrant watched the conflict, though in his eyes, slaughter was nothing more than child's play, tedious and beneath him. In the vast hall, the screech of a blade dragging across stone echoed. The second prince, Rogers, appeared behind Jael with a cold smile. Jael asked, "Who do you think will win between us?" Rogers answered firmly, without hesitation, that he hadn't joined this struggle out of revenge or resentment. To defy their father, the tyrant, meant only death. To survive, the brothers had no choice but to kill each other. Jael sneered, saying he had long despised Rogers and Lisbel. Then he tossed the helmet in his hand onto the floor. Rogers froze, his body trembling. It was the helmet of the next Knight Commander, still stained with blood. Jael pointed his sword at it, grinning madly. "Do you still think you can win? I know your secret." Before he could finish, Rogers struck first, sword flashing as he charged. Jael blocked, still taunting, his words circling back to Lisbel. As steel clashed, her hidden truth slowly came to light. The shocking truth emerged. Rogers and Lisbel were blood siblings, born of the same mother. At Rogers's birth, their mother disguised him as the child of another concubine. Thus, for years, everyone believed Rogers and another prince, Zyke, were the true brothers, while Lisbel had no such fortune. After Lisbel was born, their mother was brutally murdered. Jael took advantage of Zyke, coercing him into striking at Lisbel. Yet when Zyke strangled Lisbel, Rogers killed him instead, without harming Lisbel. That act alone revealed their hidden bond, a fact Jael quickly seized upon. "I thought only you were worthy to stand beside me, but it turns out you carry the same shameful blood." Jael roared, their swords clashing with greater fury. But what did blood ties matter before power? The princes dueled madly, steel flashing, the hall filled with the relentless ring of clashing blades. With a sweeping strike, Jael knocked Rogers's weapon from his hand. He followed with a brutal kick, sending Rogers sprawling, then pressed his sword to Rogers's throat, demanding to know where Lisbel had gone. He snarled again, asking if Rogers understood the golden light. That mysterious radiance from Lisbel's body had burned him. Rogers muttered that though he and Lisbel were siblings, they were strangers in truth, knowing nothing of each other's hearts. Jael, of course, didn't believe him. His blade had already drawn blood from Rogers's neck. Yet Rogers remained calm, asking if Jael planned to hand the throne to Lisbel, all while pointing upward. Jael looked up and froze. From the ceiling glimmered countless arrows, their tips coated in deadly poison. He hadn't expected Rogers to set such a trap. There was no way he'd gamble his life here. At that moment, both princes' guards stormed into the hall. Jael swung his sword fiercely and the two clashed once again. The poisoned arrows rained down, but both narrowly dodged the lethal volley. Realizing the moment had slipped away, Jael retreated under the protection of his men. Rogers stayed where he was, until a guard rushed up and reported that Lisbel had returned. His face darkened instantly. Meanwhile, Lisbel was walking down the grand avenue of the capital. Citizens whispered to one another, wasn't the fifth princess supposed to be dead? Yet here she was, alive. Lisbel ignored the murmurs, her eyes fixed on the carnage inside and outside the palace. Fear gripped her chest and she wondered if returning had been the right choice. Though she forced a smile, her body trembled. Hidden by invisibility, Asiles appeared behind her and pulled her into his arms. He tightened his hold, puzzled by the princess's fear, and softly asked if someone had truly become her enemy. Lisbel let out a soft sigh. Asiles reached out, wanting her to turn around so he could check her condition, but she waved him off, signaling for him to stay hidden. Suddenly, a hand seized her and a furious shout exploded in her ear. "Are you insane?" The man before her was none other than Rogers, his face twisted with anger. He gripped her tightly, pressing a dagger to her throat as he snarled, "Do you even know where you are?" Lisbel couldn't understand his fury, beneath his threatening stance, though she sensed a flicker of concern for her safety. She noticed the oddity herself and discreetly waved her hand behind her. Now wasn't the time to alert him. Rogers's voice shook with rage. "Jael wants you dead, and yet you walk right back here to throw yourself into his trap." Lisbel lowered her head, her defiant smile blooming. "This is my home. Why shouldn't I return?" She didn't know why Rogers spoke this way, but one thing was certain. Sooner or later he would try to kill her. She remembered that night clearly when Rogers slew Zaire. The way he looked at her then had been colder than moonlight. This day, she didn't realize he had done it to save her. Lisbel looked him in the eye and asked, "Are you planning to kill me right now?" Rogers remained silent. She took his silence as confirmation and laughed softly, deciding it was better to strike first. Just as she opened her mouth, a sudden gale roared behind Rogers. Asiles appeared. He seized Rogers, blasting the dagger from his hand with magic. A violent wind burst from the magic circle in his palm, hurling Rogers high into the air before slamming him against the stone wall. Rogers spat blood. Lisbel wasn't frightened. Instead, she instinctively snatched the dagger from the ground. Yes, she thought. The same merciless blood of the Valdemar line flowed in her veins. To survive, she too could slaughter her kin. Her body flared with golden light. A strand of radiance shot forth, coiling around Rogers's arm, locking him in place. The light seemed to guide her. Step by step, Lisbel approached, the glow wrapping around her wrist, tracing down to the dagger's tip. She raised it, ready to strike. But with a sharp whoosh, Asiles appeared once more. He pulled Lisbel into his arms, knocking the dagger free and whisked her away in an instant. The blade clattered before Rogers, then vanished with them into the shadows. Lisbel shoved Asiles away, furious that he had shattered her hard-won resolve. Asiles only stared, baffled by her anger. Asiles handed the short sword to Lisbel, telling her it wasn't a real blade at all but a blunt weapon. Lisbel froze. She realized then that maybe Rogers hadn't intended to hurt her. She confessed to Asiles that the man just now was her second brother. Asiles crouched down, asking what had truly happened within Valdemar. Lisbel only gave a faint smile. She didn't believe telling him would make him help her. She shot back, "If I told you the truth, would you really help me? Would you burn down the palace I despise?" Asiles promised without hesitation. As long as it was her wish, he would do anything for her. But Lisbel didn't believe a word. She knew exactly what he wanted. Her freedom, her body, her heart. She refused to be locked inside another cage. She would live for herself. Tilting up Asiles's chin, Lisbel said coldly that they had already made a deal, and he was to follow her terms. She understood well. The more she asked, the more he would demand in return. So she would never let him kill for her. All she needed was his protection. Resting her head lightly against his chest, she whispered. Under the night sky, her eyes were icy. She would kill with her own hands and she needed no one's help. Lisbel brushed aside Asiles's outstretched hand. Asiles could feel the distance between them, just a hand's breadth apart, yet it felt as if they were drifting miles away. He rose to his feet, staring at the girl glowing with golden light. She wasn't insane at all, she was sharp. Asiles agreed to Lisbel's demand, but she used the moment to warn him coldly. Never get in her way again. She stepped alone into the darkness. From behind, Asiles asked, "Do you really plan to kill your brother with your own hands?" Lisbel gave no answer. Only her footsteps echoed in the dark. She herself wasn't sure if she would truly kill him. She recalled the look in Rogers's eyes. There had been no killing intent, that he had taken lives before without hesitation, yet why was she different? Asiles pressed further, asking if she and Rogers were siblings of the same blood. Lisbel denied it firmly, unaware that Rogers was in fact her true brother. Asiles asked again, would she end up killing Rogers? Lisbel refused to dwell on the question. To her, it wasn't the point. Whether Rogers chose to kill her or not, the outcome would remain the same. In the end, only one could survive. She wanted to live. If Rogers spared her, that would only work to her advantage. With Rogers's hand removing Jael, she could be the final victor. And for that she still needed Asiles's protection. Lisbel was still wondering if Asiles could truly protect her, but her thoughts had already been laid bare in his eyes. Suddenly he pulled her into his arms, telling her that even without their deal he would still protect her. Lowering his head, Asiles kissed her hair. "I won't let you die by anyone else's hand. You're the one I finally found." In the freezing night, Lisbel felt as if she had been embraced by fire. She froze, shaken by his words. At dawn, the palace erupted in chaos. The fifth princess had returned, and she wasn't alone. She had brought back a man. Jael was the first to hear of it. What shocked him even more was that the east tower where Lisbel stayed had become inaccessible. From afar it looked ordinary, but up close every window and door had vanished. Jael's fury grew. What trick was this? He stormed off with his men to search Rogers's quarters. Reports came back that Rogers and Lisbel had already crossed blades. Unsure if he had miscalculated, Jael's anger boiled over. He hurled a vase to the ground, shattering it. Stepping on the shards, his frustration only deepened. Dealing with Rogers alone was enough trouble. And now Lisbel had a mysterious man at her side. He couldn't decide who to eliminate first. Still, he reasoned that since Lisbel had already raised her blade against Rogers, it proved she valued her own life. Jael yanked open a drawer, and froze. Inside lay the very jar of ointment he had once found in Lisbel's chambers. At that moment, Jael understood. Rogers would never harm Lisbel. If he cared enough about her wounded foot, how could he ever strike her down? With that realization, a new plan began to form in his mind. Standing by the window, Asiles summoned Baal and handed over the palace intelligence. He ordered Baal to deliver the message to the delegation and urged them to hasten their arrival. Regret tugged at him. He should have brought the delegation straight into the palace. Now they were still too far away. Asiles glanced back at Lisbel sleeping soundly on the bed. He knew she didn't trust him. not enough to share what truly happened inside the palace. That meant he would have to uncover the truth himself. He moved quietly to her side, only to see her eyes snap open at once. Lisbel asked him to use magic to help her sleep. Shackles agreed. Yet deep down he felt a sting of frustration that he thought finding her would mean easy submission, but she was still guarded. A spell of obedience could only work when both hearts aligned. Without Lisbel's trust, the magic could never take hold. For years, Shackles had hunted for the saintess. Driven by his desire to take revenge on the goddess, he could not allow that effort to be wasted. Before Hyler could find her, he had to make Lisbel yield to him completely. Shackles clenched his fist in his eyes. She was just a mere saintess. How could she possibly have the right to reject someone as powerful as him? With arrogant pride, he found himself an excuse. He was only indulging her, that was all. He slipped off his glasses. Then he summoned Tiz, the red fox. Though he cared little for Valdemar's civil war, anything that threatened Lisbel was something he could never allow. He ordered the fox to infiltrate the tyrant's chambers and uncover any useful clues. But just after giving the command, he turned back and saw Lisbel already awake. Still half dreaming, she stumbled forward and fell into his arms. Shackles instinctively tried to push her away, but Lisbel clung to him tightly. In a faint murmur, she said she didn't distrust him. It was just that even she couldn't bring herself to kill her father. Shackles doubted her words until Lisbel placed her hand against his chest, where his heart beat steadily beneath her palm. Even someone as formidable as Shackles was still just human. He couldn't make sense of her meaning. Did she mean humans couldn't kill the king? The thought barely formed before he froze. Tiz's message had returned. The king's stronghold was sealed. There existed a place in this world that even Tiz could not infiltrate. As the saying goes, when one door closes, another opens. The fox couldn't breach the king's stronghold, yet before Shackles stood Lisbel, ready at last to trust him. She realized the reason she had never trusted Shackles was because she couldn't read his heart. But now she was willing to take that step. Shackles froze in surprise. Lisbel gave him a bright, innocent smile, telling him how grateful she was that he had come to her side. "I used to be all alone," she said softly, "but now I finally have someone I can rely on. Magician, I don't dislike you." She added that for the next 10 days she wished to stay close to him like this, and when everything was over they could part with a smile. Shackles did not refuse. He wrapped his arms around her, the two of them gazing into each other's eyes as if dancing a silent waltz. He carried Lisbel back to her chamber. Laying her gently on the bed, she looked into his calm lake-like eyes, so deep, so mysterious, so unreachable. With a playful smile she asked, "Why do you always look at me that way? Do you really like me that much?" Yet inside, Shackles was anything but calm. The voice echoed in his mind again, Hyler's prophecy-like whisper. "You will fall in love with your daughter, Lisbel." And that Shackles could not accept. He looked at Lisbel, muttering softly, uncertain whether to her or to himself, truly insane. Following her request, he cast a spell, sending her into a deep sleep. He pulled the blanket over her shoulders and whispered, "You can do whatever you wish." In his silent retreat, the words felt like a promise. To Shackles, there was no need to force her as long as she stayed by his side. He would wait for the day she chose him willingly. By the next morning, Shackles realized he had been played, that he never expected so many would come knocking, causing trouble for Lisbel. And all it had taken was a single kiss, for him to labor tirelessly at her side. Down below, soldiers swarmed the tower walls like an army storming a fortress. Shackles unleashed spell after spell, blasting them back. He cursed inwardly, thinking he should have bargained for more. Lisbel only laughed, replying, "You should have thought of that during the deal." While they exchanged banter, another squad of soldiers clambered upward. Rage flared in Shackles' chest. With a snap of his fingers, the castle's stone walls shattered, hurling massive boulders down on the climbers. With a thunderous crash, the soldiers were buried beneath the rubble. Lisbel assumed all magicians could do such things, but Shackles corrected her smugly. "Not every magician can, only the truly powerful ones." Determined to impress her, he conjured a brilliant blue sphere in his palm, and the entire room pulsed with magic. A deafening boom followed, but Shackles quickly covered Lisbel's eyes, shielding her from the destructive sight. Whispering against her ear, he said, "Then let's raise the count to 2 kisses." Holding her close, the two of them could hear each other's heartbeat. Giles leaned in, ready to claim her lips. But Lisbeth interrupted, forcing him to halt. Even so, he couldn't help but drift closer to her radiant face. With one finger, Lisbeth lifted his chin. She remarked that Giles only drew near when he was happy, yet kept his distance whenever anger clouded him. Her words stirred something deep within him. He realized he couldn't just steal a kiss whenever he pleased. An irritation that made the restraint even harder to bear. Gazing out the window, Lisbeth noticed everyone outside had vanished. She quickly understood it was Giles's doing and asked him where he had sent them. Giles had no idea himself, since he had just picked a random coordinate. With a simple wave of his hand, the room that had been torn apart by magic instantly restored to perfection. Lisbeth gasped in awe, secretly delighted she truly hadn't chosen wrong. So long as such a grand mage stood by her side, she would never die so easily. She studied Giles closely. For some reason, whenever she looked into his eyes, she could sense his desire to claim her. It was a sweetness laced with danger, less like love and more like killing intent wrapped in honey. Her unflinching gaze made Giles assume she was captivated by his looks, while Lisbeth could only roll her eyes at his vanity. Still, she offered him a few flattering words to keep him pleased. She had no plans to go further with him, but who would refuse to keep a fish swimming in their pond? Noise rose again from below. Giles sighed, asking how many enemies she had and which one it was this time. Lisbeth calmly replied that it was her eldest brother. Giles immediately grasped the situation. Other than the shield and sword second prince, this eldest brother must be the main opponent to watch. Lisbeth understood that her brother must already know about Giles. She had expected her two brothers to clash first, but instead, Jicker came for her directly. What puzzled Lisbeth more was this. Rogers had never cared for her before, so why was he looking at her now with that worried expression, and yet holding back his hand? She let out a bitter little laugh and changed her plan. She would confront Rogers herself, get all the answers and only then decide whether to kill him. Giles picked up the thread, half joking. If I hadn't stopped you, you might already regret it. And yet you blame me. Lisbeth looked up at Giles with an obedient air and asked if he was angry. Of course, Giles said he wasn't. Before that, Lisbeth resolved to first check on her eldest brother, Jicker. She bowed her head. A surge of murderous intent flashed in her eyes. Jicker had once poisoned her cruelly. Those wounds remained vivid in her memory. She vowed to repay him, to return every ounce of pain he had dealt her. Jicker targeted her first. But that wasn't necessarily bad. That if Jicker died, she would be the victor. All she needed was to decisively eliminate Rogers and claim the spoils. Rogers's image rose in her mind and she hesitated, thinking, perhaps that is the way. Giles traced a magic circle in his palm and suggested lightly, then let's set it for tomorrow, at first light. Lisbeth nodded. Fine. At dawn tomorrow then. They stood by the window when Baal reported in. The delegation would arrive before dawn. Giles thought, once the envoy arrives, the civil war will be put on hold. No one dares fight openly in front of a delegation. He resolved he must learn what King Valdemar was hiding. The mysterious stronghold even Tiz couldn't penetrate it. If that was true, he would have to investigate it himself. Lost in thought, Giles looked up as Lisbeth watched him. He confirmed, dawn tomorrow. She replied, understood. That night the palace buzzed. Rogers realized he had to deal with Jicker quickly because Jicker had set his sights on that child. A retainer reported, everything's ready. Yet, are we certain about going fully to war? The crown prince plans to eliminate the fifth princess first, the retainer said. He's thrown forces toward the east tower, but we hear it can't be entered. That if so, the man with her must be far stronger than we thought. Rogers listened patiently, then asked coldly, and then? The retainer suggested, wouldn't it be safer to leave some troops to watch the fifth princess? Rogers' tone turned cold. You think that's more reasonable? Do as you wish, but I won't turn back. It ends today. The retainer tried to speak again, but Rogers cut him off. All he could do was bow and reply, understood. Rogers suddenly said softly, you've suffered through all this. I've never been much of a master to you, have I? The retainer looked up in shock. Your Highness, why would you say such a thing? Rogers lowered his head, jaw clenched. It's about your brother. The truth was, the knight commander beheaded by Jicker had been this retainer's own brother, Rogers thought grimly. If it were me, could I swear loyalty to the man who killed my kin? No, impossible. After a long silence, he finally whispered, I'm sorry. The retainer froze for a moment, then chuckled. Your Highness, are you still troubled by that? His tone grew solemn. Every knight in the capital is ready to die. I've followed you for so long. If you speak like this, it disheartens me. Even my late brother would have felt the same. He straightened his back, eyes burning with resolve. If you truly care that much, then become our king. I'll give everything to see you emerge as the final victor. Rogers paused, then muttered softly, All right, thank you. Turning away, he added, The time has come. Let's move. On the palace rooftop, the night wind howled, whipping Ashier's cloak and hair. Arcane power gathered in his hands, a halo of blue light swirling around him. In the blink of an eye, he warped to the main gate and summoned Baal. Baal transformed into white smoke, coiling around the massive doors. The wood and stone cracked along the edges with an eerie creak. Ashier's frowned slightly. Too loud. Can't wake the princess before dawn. With a snap of his fingers, silence fell as the great doors collapsed into rubble. Ashier's strode forward into the pitch-black palace. Inside the princess's chamber, Lisbel was trapped in a nightmare. I end the dream. A dark figure cradled her infant self, whispering, Smile. Lisbel, you must smile. Lisbel jolted awake, sitting upright with her hands covering her face. The dream replayed in her mind and a thought struck her. Was that shadow my mother, the woman whose face I never even knew? She rose unsteadily, realizing the sleep spell the mage had cast was wearing thin. The room was silent, empty. Gazing out the window, she muttered, Mage, you really don't listen, do you? As the master of Litte's tower, you shouldn't die so easily. But what was that dream supposed to mean? Confusion gnawed at her. Since when did his sleep magic stop working? Why would it let her dream such bizarre things? Her temples throbbed as if stabbed by invisible needles. A sharp, piercing pain suddenly spiked through her skull, making her stagger. She stumbled toward the table, grabbed the teapot, and gulped down mouthfuls of tea, hoping it would ease the pain. But the ache lingered. Wiping her lips, she tried to piece together the fragments. That voice at the end. I definitely heard something. Lisbel sank onto the sofa, racking her brain. Whose voice was that? And what exactly did it say? Just then, a faint rustling sound stirred beside her. She snapped her head around. It was Tiz, the red-furred fox that belonged to Ashier's. Lisbel greeted Tiz with a gentle voice. The little fox obediently leapt into her arms. She stroked its soft fur with tender affection. Then carrying it, she walked to the window. The palace outside was unusually quiet, clear proof that Jael and Rogers had not yet begun their battle. Suddenly, an eagle swooped into her line of sight. She immediately recognized it as one of the messenger birds trained by Rogers' cavalry. The eagle dove sharply from the sky. It landed right on her window ledge. Lisbel spotted a small pouch tied to its leg and reached out instinctively. But the moment her fingers touched it, the magical barrier Ashier's had cast shattered before her eyes. At the same moment, Ashier's, moving on his own, sensed the shattering of his barrier. He realized with unease that Lisbel's holy power was steadily returning. If this continued, Hilal would soon arrive to fight him for the saintess. Before that happened, she had to submit to him. He ordered Tiz to guard her without fail. Meanwhile, Lisbel carefully untied the string around the messenger bird's leg. A small pouch slipped to the ground. She picked it up and unfolded the note inside. But then another object unexpectedly tumbled out of the pouch. The sight of it made Lisbel's heart jolt in shock. She snatched it up quickly and rushed back inside the room. Pulling open a drawer, she found the same ointment that had mysteriously been placed there when her foot was injured. Lisbel stared in disbelief at the two ointments in her hands. They were identical, exactly the same. But why would Rogers do something like this? Should she believe him, or not? She turned, scooping Tiz into her arms, and headed toward the door. If she wanted the truth, she had to confront Rogers herself. Meanwhile, Ashier's stood before a massive gate. He frowned, debating whether he should simply break his way through. Then he noticed black smoke seeping from the cracks between the doors. In that instant, he understood why Lisbel had said those words and why Tiz could never cross this threshold. His gaze turned solemn. Tiz, until I return, you must protect her. Not a single hair on her head can be harmed. He raised his hand, commanding in a low voice, "Raj, destroy the gate." The next second, boom, the gate exploded into rubble. Elsewhere, one of Rogers's men voiced his concern. "The messenger hawk's disappearance is troubling, that it's far too clever to simply vanish. Where could it have gone?" Rogers thought to himself. That hawk was trained under extreme conditions, capable of serving well even in the chaos of war. But now that it was gone, there was nothing more to be done. He turned his gaze toward the castle gates, frowning. By now, Jicker should have shown himself. Slowly, he sheathed his sword. Then, with his men at his side, he stepped into the castle. Outside, the sounds of battle thundered like a storm, yet within the walls everything was eerily quiet. Even the guards who should have been stationed at the prince's chambers were nowhere to be seen, deepening Rogers's unease. Suddenly, clack! A sharp sound shattered the silence. Rogers turned toward it, and there it was, his missing messenger hawk. But why was it here of all places? He strode closer, eyes narrowing at the small message tube tied to its leg. Unfastening the strap, he pulled out the note and unfolded it. The words were chillingly simple. "Sister, meet me beneath the east tower at dawn for our final farewell." Rogers froze, clutching the paper tight. But who was this message truly meant for? He watched the messenger hawk vanish into the distance, his mind clouded with doubt, sinking into thought. Slowly, his fist tightened as the words from the note echoed in his head. Beneath the east tower. Inside the grand hall, Jicker lounged upon the throne-like seat. His fingers tapped lazily against the armrest, pondering who would take the bait first. A cruel grin crept unbidden across his face. He waited in silence. Before long, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed closer and closer. With a heavy clang, the great doors shut, and before him stood Rogers, rushing in. Jicker wasted no time with pleasantries. Instead, he rose slowly, calm and deliberate, raising his right hand in signal. At once, a rustling filled the chamber. Rogers stiffened, his eyes darting around the hall. All around him, glimmers of steel flashed. He was already surrounded. "You've always had those touch-and-die poison arrows, haven't you? I may not have found that exact toxin, but I prepared something else for you. This one spreads slower, but its effects are unmistakable." All around, Jicker's men revealed themselves, crossbows loaded with poisoned bolts aimed squarely at Rogers. Jicker grinned wickedly at him. "This is farewell, my dear brother." At his command, a storm of poisoned bolts rained down like a deadly downpour toward Rogers. Inwardly, Jicker smirked. With this, only one would be left. Elsewhere, Lisbel clutched his, running breathlessly, a strange instinct pulling her forward. She no longer cared what would happen if she ran into Jicker on the way. She only wanted to know, was that ointment truly sent by Rogers? At worst, I'll just die again, she thought with a bitter little smile. Suddenly, she stopped before a massive gate, the second grandest hall in the palace. Ever since the queen and concubines were executed 18 years ago, this place had remained abandoned. She reached out, ready to push the door open, but Tis suddenly thrashed in her arms, leaping to the floor. The fox shook its head frantically, warning her not to enter. Yet how could Tis stop her when Lisbel had already made up her mind? With a heavy clang, the doors swung wide open. Inside, she saw Rogers, wounded and leaning against the wall. The sound of the door made him turn sharply. His eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't comprehend why Lisbel had come here. But then worry quickly overtook his expression. At that very moment, poisoned bolts whizzed straight toward Lisbel. She froze, completely caught off guard. Unable to make sense of what was happening, she stumbled backward instinctively. Just then, Rogers seized Lisbel's arm, yanking her behind a nearby pillar. His face was tense, his voice sharp. "Tell me, why did you come here?" "Sister, I know now you're not insane. So why are you still doing this?" Suddenly, Rogers lowered his head, breathing heavily. His arm had been struck by a poisoned bolt. The venom was already spreading. Lisbel stared at him, whispering, "So it wasn't you? That note wasn't from you, was it?" Rogers' eyes widened in shock. In her heart, Lisbel thought so it really was a trap. Regaining her composure, she gave a faint smile. "Good thing you're not dead yet, but I still have questions for you. You're not allowed to die so easily." Her tone carried a hint of teasing, but the worry in her eyes betrayed her. Rogers averted his gaze, scanning the hall as if to escape her stare. "There's nothing between us. What could you possibly need to ask me?" "Yeah, nothing between us. Lisbeth murmured, her expression clouded with conflict. Rogers grit his teeth and roared, "You fool! You should have run away and lived somewhere else. Why won't you ever listen?" Lisbeth froze, stunned at so he could speak with such fire. He had always been so cold, so expressionless. Rogers snarled on, "You can't die here. If you die, how could I ever?" His voice broke into a furious shout. "What on earth are you thinking?" But Lisbeth answered softly, "Don't worry that if it's me you're worried about, there's no need." As she spoke, a faint glow began to radiate from her hands. Then, as if someone had embraced her from behind, a voice whispered into her ear, "It's almost done that you'll soon have everything you've ever wanted." At that moment, Jicker's mocking voice echoed across the hall. "Ah, your dear little sister has arrived." Rogers ignored him, clutching his poisoned arm tighter. Instead, he gently covered Lisbeth's mouth with his hand, signaling her to stay silent. In a strained whisper he began, "The last time you escaped from here." But before he could finish, Rogers collapsed, falling into Lisbeth's arms. Only then did Lisbeth notice. Rogers's arm was already blackened from the poison. Collapsing against the floor, Rogers gasped for breath, forcing the words out, "Sister, I beg you listen to me. Back then, how exactly did you escape?" At that moment, Jicker strode toward them. With a chilling grin, he sneered, "Found you.